What would you do if the only way to be yourself could cost you your life? In Paris in the year 1800, being different was a risk. The city of lights, of balls and art, hid beneath its wet alleys and dark back streets a cruel face, a society that punished anything outside what it called natural. For the travestis of the time, living was an act of courage, and every night on the streets was a battle between existing and disappearing. While aristocrats paraded under golden chandeliers and poets preached freedom, the corners of Montmartre and the lanes of the Marais saw shadows dressed in silk and fear. These were men who dared to wear dresses, makeup, and feminine names, and for that they were hunted like criminals. The police called them degenerates, the priests called them sinners, and the crowd treated them as spectacle. They lived between fascination and contempt, between hidden desire and public humiliation. At night, the cold wind mixed the smells of cheap wine, perfume, and blood. Every step was a risk. One misread glance, one wrong word, and there they were, pressed against stone walls, insulted, beaten, or dragged off by guards with no record, no name, no defense. Paris loved sin, but hated whoever embodied it. And at the center of that cruel paradox, travestis survived on whispered applause and shouted condemnations. Before we go on, take a second to support the video. If you've made it this far, it's because you want to see what really happened behind appearances, the stories history chose to hide. So hit like now. It helps this reach more people and shows you value narratives that reveal the forgotten side of humanity. And subscribe, because every new video goes deeper into that past, one made of pain, courage, and contradictions that still echo today. Tell me in the comments what has struck you most so far, the fear, the prejudice, or the strength of those who survived even when the whole world turned its face away. I read everything, and your voice keeps this conversation growing with every story. The streets of Paris in 1800 were a stage where luxury and misery blended. Beneath the glow of chandeliers and aristocratic carriages, another world existed, the world of those on the margins, surviving at night, hiding their faces and their names. Being a travesti wasn't a free choice, it was a constant risk. Paris called itself modern, but behind the elegance lay a society obsessed with punishing anyone who challenged the rules of appearance, gender, and morality. A man dressed as a woman wasn't seen as a person, but as a walking scandal. With every step through alleys wet with wine and sewage, he carried a burden heavier than any dress, the weight of judgment. By day, he had to disappear. Police watched the corners, priests thundered against sin, and even neighbors turned informants for a handful of francs. At night, when the cold took the city and fog covered the Seine's bridges, he could exist for a few hours. He dressed as he wished, spoke with those who accepted him, and worked however his body allowed, because there was no other path. Many travestis were exiled from their own families, thrown out into the streets. Others fled the countryside, hoping Paris would offer the anonymity that never came, and in the small hours between alleys and brothels an invisible community formed, made of forced laughter, quick embraces, and knowing looks that said, "We're still alive." Living like this was costly. Any client could be a trap, any encounter a sentence. Police raided taverns, arrested and publicly humiliated anyone who dared dress as the opposite sex. Many were forced to shave their heads to wear men's uniforms by force while the crowd laughed. And still, the next day, they returned to the streets, because the body, even wounded, was the only space of freedom left. And Paris, this city that pretended to be the center of progress, was also where the different learned that survival was an act of resistance. Parisian nights had a deceptive shine. Cabaret lights reflected in puddles, mixing cheap perfume with smoke and wine. In that scene, travestis survived, not only selling their bodies, but selling an illusion. For high society men slipping out of the opera in search of the forbidden, they were the secret no one could admit. For a few hours, those men traded their suits for silence and guilt, and the travestis became mirrors of the city's repressed desire. But when the sun rose, the spell broke, and what remained was borrowed shame turned into violence. The same mouth that whispered pleasure at night spat insults in the morning. Police called it an offense to public morals. The newspapers called it degeneracy. The church called it living sin. Every travesti knew a single wrong look or stray word could end in prison. And Parisian prisons did not forgive. Many left without teeth, without hair, without a name, forced to sign confessions they couldn't read, confessing to crimes that didn't exist, except the crime of being themselves. Even so, when they returned to the streets, they returned made up. Lipstick, a bright scarf, a steady gaze. For them, makeup was more than vanity. It was a way to exist in a world trying to erase them. There were also artists, poets, and bohemians who crossed paths with them at dawn and saw what others pretended not to see: humanity. Some travestis frequented clandestine cafes where people spoke of liberty and art, where difference made everything feel more alive. But even those places were fragile, one police raid away from disappearing. Still, every night they came back. Because even humiliated, they preferred a marginal truth to a respectable lie. In the Parisian small hours of the 19th century, the city breathed elegant hypocrisy. In ballrooms and Montmartre cafes, travestis were treated as exotic curiosities, creatures blending fascination and scandal. Some called them fallen angels, others abomination. But everyone looked. Everyone wanted to look. In a society that preached morality, their bodies were the city's cruelest mirror, a place that preached decency but lived on desire. They moved through alleys and cabarets, learning to command the gaze, the gesture, the voice. Every movement was rehearsal and defense. Every night, a performance to survive. In Pigalle, behind velvet curtains and reddish lights, many found shelter in brothels that accepted anyone who could entertain. There they powdered their faces, tightened corsets, and performed under invented names that sounded like promises. Madame Étoile, Mimi de Minuit, Colette de la Lune, names that let them exist for a few hours, until the makeup ran and reality reminded them who was in charge. The brothel owners set their price and clients decided when they could be humiliated. Some paid to laugh, others paid to hurt. Some nights ended in honest applause, others in shoves and slurs. Even amid insults, they kept going. The street was cruel, but it offered something neither prison nor confessional could: freedom, fragile freedom, made of fear and cheap lipstick, but the only freedom they had. And so many chose cold, contempt, and danger over being forced back into bodies that didn't feel like theirs. By day, 1800s, Paris pretended not to see what happened on the corners. The same men who sought pleasure among lace and perfume at night crossed the avenues in the morning with top hats and Bibles, preaching morals and good manners. Travestis, decadent muses by night, became invisible again, shadows drifting along the Seine, dodging stares and police. The law didn't clearly state that being a travesti was a crime, but a single accusation of indecent conduct could mean arrest, a beating, or public humiliation. One dress could end a life. In the darkest alleys, many hid in cheap boarding houses, sharing rooms with failed artists, prostitutes, and thieves. Sometimes their only mirror was a puddle, their lipstick, wax mixed with soot. Poverty didn't erase vanity, it turned it into resistance. Every painted detail was an act of courage. Every step on the cobblestones defied order. And even knowing they could be jailed or killed, they carried on. Because turning back meant dying another way, suffocated inside an identity the world refused to let exist. Some nights, one of them vanished, taken by police, by a violent client, or simply swallowed by the city. The others pretended not to notice. In a 1800s Paris, crying was dangerous. Remembering was a luxury. They learned to protect themselves from affection, to trust only the mask. Behind the makeup there was fear, but there was pride too. The pride of being who they were in a time that called it disgrace. As the years passed, Paris grew colder toward anyone daring to live outside what society deemed normal. Travestis were branded as monstrosities in an era when the body had owners: the state, the church, and the moral gaze of others. The streets of Montmartre, full of libertine artists and poets, were the only possible refuge. There, among smoke, cheap wine, and cabaret music, they could breathe for a moment. Even there, limits held. By day, curtains closed, dresses were hidden, and true names returned to whispers. At night, they were reborn under weak lights and false applause, part of a show the public clapped for, but never accepted. They knew they were the city's distorted mirror. Paris desired them and hated them in equal measure. Many worked in cafes, serving drinks to the same men who then insulted them on the sidewalk. Others did improvised shows in brothels, dancing for drunk soldiers and aristocrats. They got smiles, coins, promises, and sometimes a beating. The line between applause and aggression was thin. One wrong move, one wrong word, and enchantment turned to fury. Still they stayed. Living was an act of stubbornness, and every night survived was a small victory. Deep down, each knew they would likely never grow old with dignity. Time was cruel to those on the margins. When youth faded, the public's gaze changed. What once stirred desire now inspired disgust. Many disappeared, others reinvented themselves. All left a trace of resistance, the glint of someone who, even condemned, insisted on existing. Paris kept changing, but for them, little changed at all. Travestis aged on the same streets where they learned to survive. The mirror became an enemy. Faces no longer hid the marks of cold. Nights, eyes no longer shone under cheap makeup. Those once desired were now ignored, treated like spirits drifting between alleys and forgotten cabarets. The audience that once applauded in secret now pretended not to see, as if time had erased not only beauty, but the right to exist. Some found shelter in small theaters, living off brief shows for curious tourists. Others vanished along the Seine, trading the illusion of applause for the silence of survival. Stage names were lost, stories blurred, and Paris moved on, its sidewalks bearing the footprints of those who dared to live beyond the rules. Still something remained: courage. Even when bodies tired, their spirits refused to bend. They had defied an entire city, a morality built on hypocrisy and fear. Paradoxically, they are the ones who left the most human mark on that Paris split between glamour and shame. They were the ones who danced as the world pushed them toward oblivion, who smiled behind painted faces even when everything hurt. The city called them sinners, but none of them lied about who they were. And perhaps that was what frightened Paris most. Seeing in their eyes a freedom no law, church, or insult could erase. If you've made it this far, it's because you care about the stories time tried to hide, the ones that show the most human, painful side of the past. Before you go, hit like to strengthen this video and help it reach more people. It truly makes a difference. Subscribe to keep following. Stories like this, stories that reveal what really happened behind elegance, masks, and appearances, and comment the word Paris below, so I know you stayed to the end and belong to those who see beyond the version told in the books. Don't go anywhere. The next video on your screen goes even deeper into the past to uncover another cursed profession where living cost far more than courage alone.